The first flakes fell on the road to Dryvern as though poured from a shaken silver bowl. They drifted onto Bryn Halleck's coat sleeves, crystals melting into droplets that shone like cold beads of mercury before disappearing. Somewhere ahead, lanterns fluttered in the deepening dusk. A mile behind him, the mountain pass, raw with wind, had already sealed itself under rising drifts. It was the last week of Hearth Month, the season that turned every breath into a white ribbon and every story into something you could see. Bryn pulled his collar tighter, but not against the cold. Drafts and blizzards he could endure. Memories were harder. Tomorrow marked 10 years since his wife, Mara, had slipped from their sledge, vanished beneath a collapse of snow, and was claimed by an avalanche so sudden it had left no trace of her body. 10 winters, and still he found himself listening for the crunch of her boots outside the door, reaching for a second mug across a quiet table, or bracing for laughter that never arrived. The path to Dryvern wove between spruce and pine like a ravelling thread. He'd walked it countless times during his years as a messenger for the provincial courier, but tonight he followed it for another reason. Curiosity, half shackled to hope. Word had trickled through the crossroads, a rumour spoken at hearthside, repeated in inns, fortified by ale. Some claimed that once every decade, in a remote village, when stars turned a particular shade of icy blue, the frost lantern Maiden appeared. She carried a lamp wrought of rime and elder glass, and with a single breath could hush the wind, still the beating of wings, and hold a town in perfect suspended time. Lovers torn apart by death, so the tale went, were granted an hour, no more, no less, to speak the words they had been deprived of in life, to brush fingertips across cheekbones one last time, or to release each other in peace. Most dismissed it as nonsense conjured by grief-starved hearts. Bryn might have done the same had the rumour not threaded itself to the date of Mayera's passing, had it not arrived like a challenge ticking in the margins of his ledger. What if it were true? What if one could borrow 60 minutes from eternity? 60 minutes with her. He would barter away every year since she'd gone. He reached Dryvern near midnight. The village crouched at the foot of a frozen lake, roofs pitched steep as blades, each chimney leaking weary smoke. The square was deserted, yet within the windows Bryn saw faces pressed to glass, silhouettes hunched and waiting. At the well stood a single iron post where a lantern normally hung. Tonight the hook was empty. A voice startled him. "Traveller, have you come for her too?" Bryn turned. A boy of perhaps 14 had emerged from an alley, wool cap askew, hands jammed into patched mittens. "Come for who?" Bryn asked, though he knew. "The Maiden." The boy stepped closer, lowering his voice as if the wind might overhear. "They say she chooses where to appear by reading grief like smoke rising from every house. Dryvern's full of it. We lost 7 to ice fever in spring, and Olent's baby during harvest, and..." He hesitated. "My sister 2 moons ago. Some folks believe tonight is the night." Others emerged, drawn by conversation. An old woman leaning on 2 canes, a bearded miller, a girl clutching her mother's shawl. Their eyes carried a brightness that was neither hope nor fear, but a strange alloy of both. Bryn offered the boy a polite nod, then found an empty bench near the fountain. He adjusted his satchel, letting the rigid clasp dig uncomfortably into his ribs. He needed that edge to stay awake. The hour crept toward one, perhaps the wrong night after all. Or perhaps the myth was nothing but wind spun into fairy tale. He closed his eyes. That was when Dryvern's bells stopped ringing. Had they rung? Bryn sat upright. It was not that the bells stopped, rather it was everything that did. Snowflakes hovered mid-air, frozen not by cold, but by absence of movement. Smoke stilled half-formed above chimneys, curling shapes motionless as painted scrollwork. Somewhere the door to the apothecary had been opening, and now a man stood rigid, arm outstretched, mouth parted. Silence swept through the village square, thick and absolute. Then, at the centre of that silence, a pale shimmer unfurled. It began as frost creeping along the iron post, winding upward in crystalline vines. The vines met, wove together, and became the handle of a lantern, a cage sculpted of ice, slender ribs arching like the fragile bones of a swan. Inside, a single white flame burned without consuming wick or air, its light lending every snowflake a rainbow edge. Beneath the lantern manifested the Maiden. She was perhaps 20, perhaps timeless, shrouded in robes that belonged to mountains and moonlight, a coat of feathers so thin they seemed carved from hoarfrost. Long hair, if it was hair, flowed behind her, each strand glittering like prismatic wire. Her face invited no easy description. It was familiar, the way dawn is familiar. You recognized the gift long before your mind can catalogue colour or line. She recognized the gift long before your mind can catalogue colour or line. She walked, though walked was crude compared to how she moved, into the village square. Where her boots touched, frost petals blossomed, and yet no chill seeped past them. In her left hand she held the lantern aloft. With her right she beckoned, one silent finger curling, as though drawing the memory of a heartbeat. Bryn's breath lodged against his chest. Around him, Drevern's people remained frozen. He alone, and perhaps a handful of others, were not subject to this suspension. That meant he had been chosen. The realization struck like a smith's hammer. The Maiden's lips parted. "I smell your unsaid words," she whispered, though the air carried no wind to bring the sound. "Who claims the hour?" Bryn could not swallow fast enough. I do." "And who do you seek?" Her eyes, silver and grey with currents like distant auroras, did not interrogate so much as invite confession. "Myra Halleck. My wife!" Saying the name out loud felt like uncaging a moth that had battered his ribs for years. 10 winters dead. The Maiden inclined her head. "Your grief is jagged enough to carve. But first a promise. You will accept the length I grant. Neither plea nor prayer can stretch it. Time is delicate. We break it only carefully." "I promise," he said, though every instinct rebelled against limitation. "Then follow!" She drifted toward the frozen lake, lantern bobbing like a captured moon. Bryn stumbled behind, enthralled and terrified. At the bank she knelt, pressed her palm to the ice. A crack radiated outward, yet no water welled. Instead, blue-gold light flooded the fracture, forming an oval door. Through it he saw not water, but a dim forest path under summer's glow. Birds flickered at branches, wings pinned in mid-beat, awaiting permission to resume. "Step through," the Maiden instructed. "You'll find her in the moment you left her." Bryn hesitated. Will she know? Will she remember dying? She will know only what she needs to say goodbye. Nothing more. Their hour is for peace, not pain. The Maiden offered a fragile smile. "Go." Bryn entered the rift. Cold gave way to fragrant warmth, pine sap, soil, Myra's lilac perfume drifting from the ribbons in her hair. It was exactly as he remembered. No more than memory. Color and scent heightened as though the world had been cleaned. He stood on the trail above the avalanche site, but the slope was whole, the snowpack undisturbed. There, leaning on her walking stick, Myra examined a cluster of alpine crocuses just beginning to bloom. Her auburn curls tumbled from beneath a knitted hat, and she hummed the old travelling song her mother had taught them. He nearly collapsed. His knees surrendered to awe. She noticed him, smiled in mild confusion. "Bryn? Did you find the new spool of line? I thought the pack had room." He managed a nod, words stuttering. "My hair listen." Tears fogged his vision. "I don't have a spool, I only have an hour." Something in his tone broke through her gentle puzzlement. Concern sharpened her eyes. "What do you mean?" He took her hands. They were warm, impossibly warm compared to the decade of winter he had lived within. "I lost you," he said, 10 years ago. I've spoken to you every day since, but the words fall against an empty room. Tonight, a miracle gave me a chance to see you. I want to use it wisely, but I don't know how. Myra's fingers tightened. Then let us spend our hour together, whatever it brings. And slowly, as though deciphering the script of his face, she understood her own position in the story. No panic, no grief. Only acceptance, luminous as lantern light. Walk with me. They wandered along a river that should have been iced, but in this conjured memory rushed clear and bright. Bryn told her of the seasons she had missed, how the neighbour's boy had grown into a baker, how her sister, Rinna, had twin girls, how the orchard behind their cottage finally bore ripe apples the autumn after she passed, fruit that tasted of both honey and regret. He spoke of his courier routes, the mountain storms, the nights he drank alone by the stove. Myra listened as though time was not rationed. She asked small questions, the kind that proved deeper than declarations. Did he still play his lute on windy evenings? Did he remember to oil the hinges so the pantry stopped squealing? Had he forgiven himself on her behalf? They reached a meadow glowing with dusk. Crocuses, edelweiss and snowdrops, flowers that never shared the same season, blossomed side by side. Mayra sat upon a fallen log. "You must know," she began. "I never blamed you. Not for the snow, the mountains, or the moment you looked away. Nature is ancient and unpredictable. We travelers are temporary." She smoothed his cheek. "That avalanche was a door I happened to step through before you." Bryn bowed his head. "Oh, so angry I couldn't trade places. If you had, I would stand where you stand now, suffering the same question. Some doors opened without our consent." She plucked a snowdrop and tucked it behind his ear. "The better question is, how do we continue walking once we're through?" He tried to memorize every line of her chin's tiny scar, sway of lashes. "I don't know. By loving what remains, by planting new seeds beside old stones." She brushed tears from his eyelashes. "And by accepting gifts without demanding they become something else." Her gaze slid skyward. "Our hour dwindles." "No." Bryn's protest hardened into desperation. "I need more." 10 minutes, even. He scanned the meadow for the Maiden, for any mechanism to rewind. "You already promised." Myra clasped his shoulders. "Cherish the time. Don't stretch it until it snaps." But he trembled with need. The hush of his cabin, the years of solitude, they shrieked inside him. One more embrace could dampen that noise. He turned, searching the horizon for loopholes. Myra caught his face between her palms. "Bryn Halleck, look at me." The command in her voice was iron wrapped in silk. When he did, she leaned forward and kissed him, warm, sure, steady. "Take that with you. Let it be bigger than the silence." He closed his eyes, pressing the taste of lilac and snowdrop into his tongue. When he opened them, Myra had risen, already parting from the scene like morning mist. Her outline blurred into drifting petals. "I forgive you," she said. "Forgive yourself, then live." The world dissolved. Bryn staggered back through the ice gate onto Dryvern's lake. A soft chime rang. Once, twice, thrice. He turned. The frost lantern maiden stood where the portal had been, lantern low, flame fading. Around them, snowflakes quivered as if remembering gravity. "Your hour is spent," she murmured. He nodded, unable to form gratitude, as giants of grief and joy wrestled inside him. The maiden regarded him closely. "Few keep their oath without begging for more. You held fast. That courage will mend you." "I almost broke," his voice cracked. Almost, but did not. A small stone, yet mountains are carved from them. She lifted a hand, and starlight traced its shape. Now time must return. The lantern flared bright. Sound rushed back wind, distant dog bark, the creak of signboards. Snow resumed its downward drift. Dryvern's townfolk gasped awake, stumbling disoriented. The boy in the alley pressed fingers to his forehead, awed. Lantern light ebbed until only moonlight remained. and where the maiden had stood was empty air. Bryn found himself once more on the bench, but something inside him had shifted. Cracks sealed themselves. Breath expanded without catching. He exhaled, and for the first time in a decade, the vapor carried no weight. A gentle tap reached his ear. The boy approached, wide-eyed. Was she here? Did it happen? Bryn placed a hand on the lad's shoulder. Yes, and you'll see your sister. He surprised himself with the certainty in his words. Listen for the bells, keep your promise, and when you return, remember what she asks of you. The boy's throat bobbed. I will. Bryn left the square heading south, toward the road that unspooled between tall pines. Tracks behind him filled with fresh snow, yet wherever his boots pressed, crocus buds nudged through frost, defying season. Perhaps they were illusions, leftovers from a mythic hour. Or perhaps Myre's parting advice already took root. He reached the rise overlooking Dryvern and turned for one last glimpse. Houses glinted like low constellations, everyday faith shining inside them. Above, the aurora shimmered, pale ribbons echoing the maiden's robes. Bryn lifted his gaze until cold made his eyes water, then started down the opposite slope. Whatever doors awaited on the journey ahead, he would knock without fear, and should he find himself alone by a winter fire, he would remember the kiss, the meadow, the snowdrop behind his ear. He would play the traveling song on his lute and let the notes twine with memory, not to resurrect the past, but to light the path forward. Somewhere, perhaps in another village wound tight with sorrow, the frost lantern maiden would raise her icy lamp again. Bryn carried no map to chart her. He only carried a promise kept and a goodbye spoken, anchors against the drift of years. It was enough, more than enough, to set the rest of his life in motion, thawing minute by minute as dawn crept over the spilling snow.